I thank the chairman. Actually, let me start with a unanimous consent request for two documents. One being the Democrats' corporate tax plan threatens higher bills for manufacturers. The second, Chinese Communist Party linked solar panel company could reap Inflation Reduction Act handouts with U.S. factory.
So ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staying with the Inflation Reduction Act for just a minute. They created two new corporate taxes. Mr. McBride, two new corporate taxes were created in the Inflation Reduction Act, 26 tax credit programs on top of an already complex and burdensome tax code. So I think your colleagues at the Tax Foundation, it's estimated that over $300 billion a year is lost in productivity due to the complexity of the United States tax code. So every Congress that I have been here, I have introduced H.R. 1040. This is a flat tax, a version of the same flat tax that was created by my predecessor, Leader Army, when he was here. And honestly, you referenced the Estonia tax code and how people can file their taxes in under 5 minutes. And wouldn't reducing the complexity of the tax code and perhaps flattening the rate a little bit, would that not have a positive effect on people's compliance with the tax code as well as overall tax collections?
Absolutely would. So the real world examples we have, not just in Estonia, but a lot of their neighbors in Eastern Europe, that's where flat taxes really took off in the 90s. Many countries there implemented flat taxes, and they did so because, one reason, they were having a big compliance problem. They were having all sorts of, major tax evasion with a complicated income tax like ours. So they came upon a solution which is to simplify the rules, flatten the tax, toss out all the special provisions, and lo and behold, they found it generated better compliance and more stable and reliable revenues over the years. And so they stuck with those flat taxes, and then Estonia went further, and eventually with their business tax, they simplified it even further to this distributed profits tax. There's basically no taxable income. There's no calculation of taxable income at all. Instead, it's just a tax on whatever is distributed to shareholders. Taxing one stream rather than calculating all items of income and all items of expense, et cetera, and sending it to the tax authorities.
Well, it's a practical matter. They suffered from not bringing.
All right, say that again.
As a practical matter, has Estonia suffered from not bringing in enough tax revenue?
No, absolutely not. They generate revenues today, 20 years into this new system, that have essentially are pretty typical across the developed world in terms of income tax collections.
So just my own observation, living and working in this country in 1986 when the Reagan tax cuts were introduced and passed, the Bush tax cuts in 2004, and Chairman Brady's tax reform in 2017. My observation is you seem to have an increase in compliance. You didn't have to hire 87,000 new IRS agents, but you made things more straightforward, and people complied because it was easier to comply than it was to hide your income and try to not comply. Is that a valid assumption?
It's absolutely valid. When we have a tax code today that's 4 million words, I don't think any person on earth has the ability to understand something like that.
Mr. Chairman, in the time I have remaining, I'm going to have another unanimous consent request. It also deals with the Inflation Reduction Act. This is a page from the Federal Register from October 14, 2022, from the Department of Health and Human Services, and reports the establishment of the Medicare Drug Rebate Negotiation Group within the Center for Medicare. Most people did not realize that with the creation, or with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, the federal government will now have the largest and most secretive PBM that has ever been developed. Now, a lot of us decry the PBM because we say they only add complexity and they don't bring anything of value to the system. When you read through these words in the Federal Register, it absolutely describes a nightmare going forward. And of course, their enforcement mechanism is the tax code, a 1900% tax on any gross revenues that the company may create. So, Mr. Chairman, this is a very serious matter, and we haven't talked about it enough, but I do want to introduce this for the record, and perhaps at some point in the future, we can have a hearing on the deleterious effects on what's happening in the United States with the so-called mislabeled Inflation Reduction Act.
I thank the gentleman